So yeah, it's nice to have a tan. All right, hi everyone. I missed you guys. It's been a little minute. I'm gonna go ahead and pop up the listing contract now, unless anyone has any questions. No? Okay. Those of you in the classroom, if you're in mentorship, please sign in. If you're not in mentorship, please do not sign in. Also, I'd like to remind you, I don't monitor the chat box because I share screen during the class. I highly encourage you to speak up, interrupt me. I make mistakes. Sometimes I use acronyms. If you have questions, interrupt me. If it's off topic, I'll let you know that we can discuss it after class. If it's on topic, we'll talk about it at that time, okay? All right, so. Can everyone at home see disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it. Yep.
Great. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. All right.
Perfect.
Great. So with every contract, whether it's listing contract, residential purchase agreement, you're going to have certain disclosures that auto-populate with those documents. The reason for that is these disclosures are really important and they're required to accompany every contract. So they made it idiot-proof. You don't have to add them in. So you're going to see these disclosures. So we do have a separate disclosure class where I kind of review disclosures, but you should read all of them, even if I don't review them. We don't have enough time in class to go over every single disclosure here. The first one is about agency relationship. Your responsibilities as either the seller or the buyer's agent, what your responsibilities would be as a dual agent. Then we have fair housing and discrimination advisory. This is a newer form. It basically goes over what protected classes of people are. So for instance, like in an MLS description, we can't say walking distance or great family home, right? Because that's discrimination against familial status, against someone's ability to walk, that sort of thing. I used to make jokes when I was still in my wheelchair about how, you know, like I should be allowed to use those terms, but, you know, a cursory explanation of this should be good enough for your clients, but sometimes it's not. So make sure you read these, make sure you're familiar with them. If you have questions, ask your mentor, come and ask me. All right, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent, exactly what it sounds like. So we talked about dual agency just a moment ago. Dual agency doesn't necessarily mean me as the agent representing both the buyer and seller. It means me and anyone from the same brokerage representing both parties. Okay, but there is a difference, right? It's very hard for me to represent both a buyer and a seller and do a great job. Doesn't mean that it's hard for any one of you to represent one of the parties and me to represent the other party, but that's still considered dual representation. And so if you didn't have this document signed, you know, that would be a violation of disclosing dual representation, which is a big no-no, which is why it's automatically included with every package. Wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. This oftentimes can scare buyers or sellers. This document's not so relevant for sellers because it is uncommon that a seller wires money anywhere in a transaction. They're usually receiving a wire, right? That's not always the case. As our market shifts, sometimes a seller will owe more on a property than they receive at the time it closes, meaning they would have to wire in funds, the shortage, the difference, to close. In any case, what has been happening is somehow people committing fraud have been able to obtain contact information for a buyer or seller in a transaction. They pose as the escrow or title company, and they send fraudulent wire instructions over to these parties, asking them to wire in their earnest money deposit or their closing funds. If that happens, you are not closing a deal. That money is long gone. So if you're representing a buyer and they're going to send in money, you'll want to get on the phone and actually verify with the buyer, with the escrow officer, the wire instructions, and that's how we avoid that. So this is one of the things that my buyers usually and sellers do usually ask me about because it sounds scary, right? So make sure you know what it means. All right, here we are with our residential listing agreement, also known as the RLA. Okay, as you progress in your career, these acronyms will become more useful to you than the names. You'll get tired of talking. And the revised date right next to it. So as we all know, our listing contract and residential purchase agreement, as well as some of the major documents that often accompany them or alter them in a transaction, were revised last year. So make sure if you're watching classes online for any kind of contract, you watch newer versions. Our residential purchase agreement was changed December of last year. So just be careful about that, because if you're taking old classes, the document won't even look anything like what we're looking at now. Okay. Top left here, date prepared. This is you as the agent enter this date, and this is a legal reference date. So it's not the date of the listing when it starts. It's not the day the client signed it. It's literally the date that you drafted this document. It doesn't matter what day that is. Now, I will on occasion, I'll draft something yesterday. And my client doesn't sign it until today, and they'll say, oh, this date needs to be today. That is not the case, but I'd rather have my client be happy than be right. So does it hurt for you to change it? No, because you just altered something on it. So you can say date prepared is today. This date is important, just as it is in the residential purchase agreement contract, because if you ever alter a contract, which happens oftentimes, maybe you're going to change the price. Maybe you're going to change the date that the listing goes live on the MLS. You'll use a document called modification of existing terms. Okay, modification of existing terms is used to modify residential listing agreement. We're going to talk about that more because I have a trick that I use in order to get a listing signed and valid and skirt the rules of having to enter it onto the MLS within the 2 days, because I oftentimes don't have the marketing materials prepared in 2 days. And I'll never have them done in 2 days. So we'll talk more about modification of terms. But when you modify these contracts, it will ask you what you're modifying, and it will have check boxes or boilerplate language, and you'll select whichever one it's in relation to. So if we're modifying the residential listing agreement, you're going to check the box for residential listing agreement. If it's another document, you might have to write it in. Maybe there's another checkbox. In any case, it's then going to ask you dated. So we're altering with that other document, this residential listing agreement, then date prepared, dated, and whatever that date is here in the top left box, that's what's going to go on there. So very important date box. Okay. All right. Exclusive right to sell. This is your seller's name. Where do we get the seller's vesting? Okay. This is called vesting. It's not necessarily the seller's name. Why? Well, the seller can have their property held in title by trust, in a trust, sorry. They can hold title to their property in a trust. So vesting means how is title held? Okay. So this can be a natural person's name, or this can be an entity. An entity being like a corporation, an LLC, a trust. A trust is very common. Sometimes you will have people that show in the property record section of the MLS on title that is not correct or accurate. In fact, very often, especially if it's an entity, there's a limited amount of characters. So I really want you to try to avoid using property record section of MLS to get the seller name. You don't ask your sellers for this either, because I can guarantee you most of the time they're going to be wrong. Who do we ask for this information? So, title, that's right. Title rep, or have them set you up with title software where you can pull this information yourself directly. It will give you a lot of information. Now, if you happen to know someone has passed away, title will not reflect how vesting maybe is currently held or how the contract should be drafted as far as the seller. So if that is the case, most of the time there's going to be a legal professional involved, okay? And that legal professional can tell you how the seller should be listed on your listing contract. Why is this important? Because if you don't have the correct seller name on here or vesting, it's not a valid contract. You don't have a valid listing. That's right. If I own a property with my brother, Levi, and you have a listing contract with just me because you thought I was the only seller, do you have a valid contract? Absolutely not. The only way you're going to know that is if you make sure you go to title. Okay. Hereby employs and grants, broker. Okay, so the broker is not me. The broker is my brokerage where I hang my license. So for us, what is it going to be? Keller Williams, Beverly Hills. Clearly, I chose to pull a residential listing agreement from a buyer zip forms file I have because It says Berkshire Hathaway. In any case, this will always say Keller Williams Beverly Hills. All right, now, beginning date and ending at 11:59 on blank date is your listing period. This means when your listing starts and when it ends. If you do not have a start and end date, again, you do not have a valid listing contract. In fact, I may have taken a listing from someone in this office based on that technicality. I didn't know they were working with another agent in the office, but I signed a listing contract and this agent filed a complaint against me. I didn't know that they were involved at all, but the seller wanted to continue working with me. And so we looked at a copy of the previous listing agreement because I said, well, you can't work with me unless you cancel this with the other agent by your mutual agreement, right? I can't work with you because you have a listing agreement. Saw it and technically no. I was like, oh, never mind. You don't have a listing with the other agent.
Was missing an end date, you said?
Huh?
What did you say was missing?
It, either the beginning or the end date. I can't remember. Only one of them was missing. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't intend to do anything like this on purpose, right? We want to keep really good relations with the people in this office. But
So unless both dates are there.
yeah, it's not valid.
It's not valid.
What do you need to have? You need to have terms, timeframe, consideration, compensation, dates, signatures involved to have a valid contract, right? That's basic contract law for the state. All right, so what's our most common listing timeframe? 6 months is the most common. Can you do it shorter or longer? Yeah, absolutely. Who decides that? You and the seller. Yeah. So guys, what do you think would be the shortest shortest listing period that would be reasonable for you to take?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, why 3 months, guys?
That's how long it would take for a escrow.
Yeah, your escrows can fall apart, right? You don't want to lose your listing because, you know, there was a bad inspection or they couldn't come to negotiations, but that's not the real reason why. The real reason why is because you paid a lot of money to market this listing. You put a lot of time into getting this property sold, right? And so every listing you take, it's somewhat of a gamble for you because you're putting your capital and your time into it. Not every listing is a good listing, right? So does this mean I should take a $2 million, you know, a house that's worth $1 million, the seller wants me to list it for 2 million? Does that mean I should take it? You know, maybe not. If I believe that the seller might reduce that price, perhaps that's a choice I make as a business owner, right? So I will not take a listing under 3 months. You're welcome to do so, but just think about the risk involved for yourself. Now, on the flip side, how about how long can you go? No, that's not the case. Actually, courts have determined that anything over a 12-month initial listing period, it doesn't mean you can't extend it, okay? You can use that modification of terms document I told you about. If you and the seller agree to extend the listing, you can totally do that, but your contract should not be past 12 months. The reason for that is the court argues that market conditions can change very drastically within 12 months. So the listing terms that you have might not be fair to, well, really the seller, in this case, the consumer, right? They don't really care that much about us. So not every listing is created equal. It is your choice. I don't know that the brokerage will actually allow you to take anything under a month though. Okay, so you might want to check with Michael Rosales if that is the case, if you're considering doing that. All right, so the next line here is for the address. So address is very important. You want to get the legal address, and we're again going to get this from where? Not from the MLS, not from property records, title. And it's very important because we have a lot of areas in Los Angeles that have different names. You maybe even write it on an envelope to send mail to them, such as Venice, Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Hollywood. These are all actually City of Los Angeles. And this is important because City of Los Angeles has transfer requirements that other cities might not have. You know, Brentwood is actually Los Angeles. If you wrote Brentwood on a post envelope, it's going to go somewhere else because there's actually a city in Northern California called Brentwood. Okay, so though we refer to these as areas, which is really important because LA is really large, right? It's so important that we know what the legal city is, because if we're a listing agent here, we have to take care of some extra requirements, like a 9A Los Angeles City building report, certificate of compliance, where you The seller might have to do something called retrofitting work that affects things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, automatic gas shutoff valves on gas lines, water heater strapping, things like that. Okay. Let's talk about, just to give you an example, like on the flip side, there are some cities that are their own city. Beverly Hills, Culver City, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Inglewood's its own city.
Burbank?
I don't know about Santa Clarita. Burbank is city of Los Angeles. But you don't need to memorize this. Why? Because you can always go to your title professional or title software and see. And when in doubt, because people will, like your references, you might even look at, you know, something that looks official and it might say something like Brentwood in the address. You can ask your title rep for something called legal, okay? A legal description. We talked about the seller name being the term vesting. You want to sound really fancy to your title rep, you can ask them for legal investing on a certain property. The legal description will be this big, scary, nonsensical paragraph that has a lot of tracks, blocks, numbers, things like that, directions, feet. We don't care about any of that. There will always be in every legal description a line that says located in the city of, and there's our keyword, in the city of. Whatever follows that, that is your legal city, okay? Next, we have assessor parcel number, almost always referred to as APN, okay? People don't usually say assessor parcel number, APN number. APN number, this is one of the biggest or most common mistakes I see in both listing contract and in residential purchase contract is the agent will leave it blank. That is not okay. This is actually a stronger identification of where a property is located in most legal arenas than the actual addresses, okay? So in the APN numbers are assigned by county, okay? In the county of Los Angeles, you will always have a 4-digit - 3-digit - 3-digit format. If you see something different, there is a problem or the property is not in the county of Los Angeles. On a very rare occasion, you will not be able to find an APN at all. This is an extremely rare occasion. This usually happens, and you call your title rep to verify this, if there's been a recent subdivision or combination of lots. What does that mean? Like, so a builder took 2 parcels, 2 homes, and legally had the city combine the lot so they could build a larger property on one. Or subdivision, they took a large lot and they broke it apart and they built separate, several separate homes that they can sell separately, okay? Or something called a land lease. This is going to be in relation to condos. This is very rare, but there are 2 complexes that I'm aware of in the general area, Ocean Towers in Santa Monica and Marina City Club in Marina Del Rey, where the condos were built upon land that the condo owners don't actually own. Very unusual. It could be problematic, except the city of Los Angeles stepped in a long time ago and started buying properties like this up. In any case, these properties don't have an APN number always either, but you'll want to check with your title rep. Okay. Next line, this checkbox is for a manufactured mobile home. We don't have a whole lot of those around, but does anyone here know what the criteria is? Because you can't necessarily sell all mobile homes as a real estate agent. What is the criteria for you to be able to represent a mobile home sale? They have to own the land. Yeah. So a lot of mobile homes are like that condo complex that I just told you about. They have a land lease. They actually lease the lot in a mobile home park, right? So that's personal property if they don't own the real estate. We're real estate agents, right? And real estate is in relation to land. So if they own just the mobile home, that's more of like a car sale. That's a personal property sale. We are not licensed to do that. The process is entirely different. We cannot do that. Okay. The second box here is in the case that the listing is a probate, conservatorship, guardianship, or receivership. Okay. These are more complicated sales that are usually directed to you by an attorney, not always. Sometimes the, whoever's in charge who's inherited this property or taken over responsibility of this property might hire you. But if it's a probate listing, there'll be an addendum for it probate listings can be very complicated, or they can be very simple and like a standard sale. You don't need to understand any of these. If you have any of these types of sales, probate, conservatorship, guardianship, or your buyers are interested in any of these, you'll definitely want to come see someone like Mike Rosales or myself. Definitely talk to your mentor. Don't even talk to clients about this yet. They can be simple, but they can also be very complex. And you can't rely on what the other agent is telling you. I find oftentimes that even with my limited experience with some of these types of sales, I know a lot more than the listing agent, and they're giving me erroneous information. Okay, so just be careful about it. You can 100% do it in some instances. A lot of times with probate, if it's the more complicated type, a buyer can't purchase it with a loan. So you'll want to know that instead of sending your clients out there and, you know, not looking like the knowledgeable agent that you should be because you're coming to these classes. All right, listing price and terms. Who determines the list price? Right. Do they usually agree with you? No. Is that all right? Well, it depends usually how far off you are, right? Some sellers will listen to you. Some sellers will let you underprice strategically. You know, again, this is your decision as a business owner to decide if you want to take this listing. I oftentimes will take overpriced listings as long as I have a discussion with the seller where I feel like they're being realistic, you know, open to reducing the price at a later date. If I feel like I really want to take the listing, but I'm not so sure that they're actually going to reduce the price, you know, at the time that we discussed, I might actually write into listing terms like a pre-negotiated automatic price reduction if no offer has been accepted by a certain date. Okay, so I will use this section listing terms for that. Now, I do want to caution you to be very careful when you use these free form fields and you type stuff in, okay? Because even if it's clear and it makes sense and it addresses the item that you want to alter or add, the condition you want to add, you might not be aware of how it can affect something else that's covered in the contract that should also be included. Okay, so just be very careful and make sure you speak with someone very experienced before you use these free form fields for anything in any type of contract. All right, compensation to broker. So I want to make it very clear that the seller pays both agents, both the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. Okay. So the total commission should be listed here. Guys, what is the most common total commission? That's right. Okay. Can it be lower or higher? Yeah, absolutely. It can. A lot of people tell me, especially new agents, oh, I'm going to go in looking for 6%. More power to you, girls and boys, but I will be right behind you with 20 years experience on you asking for 5. Okay.
I got a list.
Congrats.
6.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I will ask for 6 sometimes, like if I've overseen extensive renovation, if I've done something exceptional or spent a lot of time on something, I might ask for 6.
But no, she told me to do the 6%.
Try. I mean,
Yeah, I tried.
try.
Well, when she objected, I just told her.
Let's hear. I want to hear this.
Okay.
Can you speak up so everyone at home can hear you?
I'll go to my phone so I can tell you exactly what I said, and is she not his plan? She's been in her house since '94, it's only home, so she doesn't know. So I said, it's for you to have a competitive advantage for the buyer's agents to put you at the top.
Extremely smart response. So her response was that because the seller's paying 6% commission, 3% will be offered to the buyer's agent, which would give them or more agents more incentive to try to sell the listing. That's probably true because there are a lot of unethical agents out there. But is it ethical for us to show or not show property based upon the commission? It is not. 100%. But when sellers try to whittle me down past 5, that is always my argument. Look, I'm an ethical agent, but not every agent is. And I know from past experience that when I have listings where I'm offering less than 2.5% to the buyer's agent, I don't get as many showings. Yeah. Good sale, man, because I'm not sure that I ever be able to convince a seller that they're going to get a better price by giving me 6% so I can give 3 to the other side. So on that note, How much of the total commission should we be offering to the other agent? Half of whatever it is. Can we do more or less? Yes, but not necessarily considered ethical. However, in the instance I told you where I might ask for 6, where I'm doing something very exceptional, like overseeing a complete remodel for a client on a home that I'm listing when they live overseas, something like that, right? Where I'm really going above and beyond. I might ask for 6% and I might take 3.5 myself, but I discuss that with the seller. That's all needs to be above board, understood. They have to be in agreement with that, and offer 2.5 to the buyer's agent. That is something called listing broker advantage, when the listing broker is receiving more commission than the buyer's agent. And none of that needs to be covered in the documents or contracts in your transaction. However, when you enter a listing onto the MLS, there is a disclosure section. And one of those disclosures is listing broker advantage. That's what that means. And you would need to list it there. Don't worry, nobody else is ever going to catch it or even look at it. But if it's not on there, you can get yourself in some trouble. So just know that. I didn't know that until I'd been in my career like 15 years.
Is that a box?
In MLS, when you do MLS entry, there's a box that says disclosure, and you can select multiple things if you want. One of them says that listing broker advantage. All right, so we have a secondary option that talking about the commission at a dollar amount, a finite dollar amount. I don't know that our brokerage will approve that. If you have a client who's interested in a finite dollar amount commission, please see Michael Rosales, and I'm sure depending upon the number, you can work that out with him, but that is not common. And why is it not common? We oftentimes sell for much higher or much less than what we have the property listed for, right? Let's see here. We talked about listing terms using that box. And blank. So this and blank part of the commission is, like, I've had a seller before say, look, if you can get me a full price offer within 10 days of the listing going live, I will give you a bonus. Or let's offer a bonus to the buyer's agent if they get an offer accepted at list or higher price. I like to stay away from these things because I don't think it's truly ethical, right? I don't like to offer incentive to the buyer's agent to do something unethical. I don't like to, same thing, put myself in the situation of my commission being dependent upon terms. What my job is to do is to get what the best offer at the best terms I possibly can based upon the offers I receive, right? And a whole lot of other stuff. I'm making it sound very easy, as we all know it's not super easy. All right, section 3A2. What's that? Oh, if within blank calendar days after the end of the listing period or any extension or cancellation of this agreement, seller enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to anyone or that person's related entity who physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period or any extension by broker or cooperating broker. I'm going to stop reading now. This section of the contract is called the exclusions clause. This is very important for you as an agent. This happens all the time. You'll want to know this also if you ever chase, cancel, or expired listings. Okay, what it says is that if the listing agent has a listing contract with the seller and they have a time frame in here, and they provide a written list to the seller of everyone they showed the property to during their listing prior to the cancellation or expiration of their offer, if anyone within the time frame from the time of cancellation that was on that list buys the property, that previous listing agent that gave that list to the seller is actually due the commission, and they will step back into the transaction and act as a listing agent, right? So this is really good for you guys. If you ever have a listing you can't sell, it's overpriced, something like that. I haven't had this happen, but I hear all the time, first listing agent is super pissed because they didn't renew the listing with the first listing agent. They chose a new agent the second time around, and they gave the new agent the price reduction the first agent's been asking for the entire time. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
There
One
is,
isn't a fresh because they made 2 of you over there.
oh, no, do you want it? Does anyone want coffee?
Sugar free, fat free, vanilla. No?
No?
What are we doing this one?
Careful, it's triple shot, but yeah. Um,
So how many days is customary?
The customary time frame is 180 days, but I do see shorter and longer timeframes on here, anywhere from 30 to 365.
That should be filled out all the time.
Should be, yeah, and keep track of who you show your listings to. I am also very diligent about making sure people sign in at my open house. So if people are hesitant to sign in, I'll say, I actually contractually need to keep track of everyone who's entered the property. If you're not comfortable writing down your contact information, you don't need to. But if you could please, I do need your name. Huh? Well, whatever. Most people won't lie about it. They can put an initial last name.
What are the other than the 180 days, what are the other customary ones?
180 is almost always customary. You might get a really experienced seller trying to get you down in numbers. Okay. I mean, I generally don't take a listing. I don't think I can sell like within reason. But when I was newer in my career, I would pretty much take anything I can get. And so I worked with people I wouldn't work with now. Like if I don't trust someone, I'm not gonna work with them. Just not gonna do it. But before I needed money badly. So I worked with anyone that even pretended like they wanted to work with me. I wrote offers for people who didn't have a proof of funds. I made myself look like an idiot a couple of times. But there were a couple times I put my reputation on the line and I did close.
What's the minimum?
The minimum,
If
I mean,
it's-
you can put 0 on here if you want. I wouldn't.
No, I mean, other than 180 was like customary.
A 180 is customer. That's the customer. I would start arguing with the seller if they wanted to go below 60 days. Yeah. Maybe even 90. Not arguing. I don't know if I'd want that listing. You know, like why is the seller so concerned about this exclusions clause? Now, keep in mind though, that this list has to be given to the seller before the expiration or cancellation. If you don't deliver it to them before, it's not valid. So if you are chasing expired and canceled listings, guys, what do you need to ask your seller if they have? This list from their previous listing agent. Okay.
Expired listing.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, I've never chased canceled or expired. Usually there's something, there's a problem. Seller's probably pretty stubborn. But also I'm very worried about this exclusions clause. All right, section C. In addition, seller agrees to pay broker. We don't use this line, like I said, but there have been some exceptions to this. This is not customary, but I had a client who wanted me to take out a full page LA Times ad a few years back. That costs a lot of money, okay? And as we all know, most people look online trying to find homes now, and they go through an agent most of the time, right? I tried to explain to my seller that this would be like a $6,000 ad, and I didn't think that we would get much traction from it, but they insisted. And they said, okay, so if it doesn't sell, I will pay you back for it. And I said, no, if it doesn't sell, you'll pay me back for it, but if it does sell, you'll pay me back half of it. They agreed. Let's see, section D, seller has been advised that the broker's policy regarding cooperation with other agents is blank. They don't really need to be advised of anything. This section is about what? It's about the portion of the total commission that we're offering to the buyer's agent. And we've already discussed that. It should be what percentage of the total commission? 50%, half of it. That's right. Unless there's an extenuating circumstance like we've already discussed.
So if you have like 5.4, I put 2.5 here.
Mhm. If the total commission's 5%, yeah, you're gonna check this box here and write in 2.5 right here. Just like that. And that's also listed publicly on the MLS. I have been in a transaction where it was my listing where the buyer and seller couldn't come to an agreement as far as credit request after inspections. And my seller tried to tell me I needed to pay the other agent less commission. I was like, I cannot do that. It is, I'm contractually bound. Can't do that.
Unless they agree to it, right? Isn't the shoe-
Yeah, we both kicked in a little bit of cash, I think, to make it work. But that was a 6% commission, so.
so,
All right. Section F. So this is going to apply to you that are going after the canceled and expired listings. The seller, right, had been in a previous listing agreement. So if they had, for chasing these types of listings, there should be something on this line, always. Okay, and needs to list the broker that the house was previously listed with. In high end, sometimes been listed a couple times by a couple different brokerages.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, if you're working with a seller that is a canceled or an expired listing, so it's been previously listed, you're gonna need to name the previous brokerage that it was listed with here in this box, okay? And then section F2, it's saying the seller says they have no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker, and that's what they're gonna think. But now you know about this exclusions clause thing, those of you who are going after the expired and the canceled, that is not the case. So you need to ask your seller, did your last agent give you a list of names of the people who saw your property before you canceled or the listing expired? If the case is yes, you'll need to get a copy of those and you'll need to say, see attached here, and actually physically attach that copy. Now, would anyone know whether you did this or not? No. How is the other agent gonna know until maybe long after the fact? Maybe they're bitter and they stalk these owners and they find that out. They can come back and see you, whether or not you knew. They can go back and sue the seller, whether or not they knew. So it's in your best interest you do this correctly, right?
So let's say I closed the deal
Mhm.
6 months later and they found out or 5 months later and they sued me. I
They'd be in the
didn't have
right.
that included. Would that be my fault?
Yeah.
Like, if I have the list
Yes,
included?
sir. Who's the real estate professional that should know this? You. Now, is it your fault if you asked the seller and they said no? No,
So it's
Right.
not disclosed.
that's right. They are at fault for not disclosing. You can't know that. Yes.
What if it was verbal? You ask the seller, don't disclose.
Your word against my word. So those of you who are going after these types of listings specifically should do it in writing, right? At least a text. I mean, most people will text nowadays, right? Sometimes an official email will sound kind of scary, but you can at least get it in the text, cover the butt. A lot of times what happens though, even though we have clear rules about this, is usually the seller and the previous listing agent don't get along anymore at this point, right? So remember, I told you that previous listing agent actually steps back in and represents the seller in the transaction. Sometimes the seller's like, no way, what listing agent wants to work with that? A lot of times you guys will negotiate something. Hey, I know you're entitled to commission, but the seller doesn't want to work with you. You don't want to work with the seller. I'll do the deal and give you a referral, 50-50. You're probably not going to get away with less than that because technically they're entitled to the whole thing. And they technically legally could force that seller to work with them, but nobody wants to work under those conditions. Brokers, brokerages don't typically back that kind of behavior. So just so you know, that is another common outcome in that situation. All right, section 4A, items included and excluded. Now, what we're talking about here is personal property, okay, that would legally or by request either be included or excluded under the terms of the purchase contract. But we're looking at the listing contract. Is the buyer involved in the listing contract whatsoever? No. So no matter what you write on here, is it binding upon the buyer? Absolutely not. They never see this. This is more of a section so that you know how to correctly market the property and tell everyone what's included and excluded, but also so you know. Buyers and sellers are not real estate agents. They don't know the legal definition of what should be included and excluded, right? By legal definition, anything permanently affixed to the property should be included. This means a television bracket, but not the TV in the TV mount, right? This means light fixture should stay. This is a very common problem. Sellers not aware of this, and they'll go take their, family heirloom light fixture out of a room. You've closed escrow. you know, it was there when the buyer did their final walkthrough. Now it's gone when they move in.
It's a really old movie like that with Richard Pryor. But have you seen that movie?
I haven't.
Oh,
No.
it's called Moving, and then they bought this house and it was all nice, and then when they came back to live in it, everything was gone basically.
Yeah,
The windows, the. you
Yeah.
know.
can't do that. Right? So it's very important that you and your seller are on the same page about what they need to understand what should stay and not stay. This opens the dialogue for that discussion, so you're clear about it, right? A lot of times, you, appliances, washer, dryer, things like that might be negotiable. It's more common for a seller to leave the appliances because they usually fit the space that it's in, right? But it's not always. Sometimes my sellers will say it's negotiable. You know, if it's a great offer, it's not a deal breaker. You know, I'll give it. But if it's not a great offer, I might choose that I want to keep it. Right? So I just want you to know this is the discussion starter so that you can represent the seller correctly. These items are not bindable upon the buyer. Plus, you think if a seller said washer and dryer are non-negotiable, they're coming with me. Do you think if they got an amazing all cash offer where the buyer insisted on washer and dryer, they're going to say, no, I need that washer and dryer? Probably not. This is more so that you know what you're doing. So you have this discussion so expectations are met. It needs to be outlined again, not again. What is actually going to happen, what's going to stay and what's going to go needs to be outlined in the residential purchase agreement. And even though we know what the legal definition is, it's not always clear to our consumers or buyers and sellers, right? So when in doubt on the residential purchase agreement, go ahead and write it in there, even if it's a chandelier that's included, okay? I actually just had a problem on a deal that I closed last week where there was a Murphy bed. A Murphy bed is one of those that is mounted to the wall and folds down. By legal definition, is that included?
Supposedly,
But I also wrote it, the listing agents were absolute shit. I've never worked with worse listing agents in my life out of area. I wrote it into the residential purchase agreement just to make it clear because I didn't want to leave anything to chance. I've had one too many bad experiences with inept people. They took it. They took it. And so from my vacation, this is the only time I worked while I was on vacation. I had to have like a nasty little email and text battle with the two listing agents. And, you know, they were like, well, it's gone. You're not getting it back. And I'm like, well, then you will see my clients in small claims court. And it says very clearly on our contract that you agreed to. Not only that, by legal definition, it's included. If they wanted it, you should have asked me for it. And they had like the audacity to come back to me and say, we feel like you knew it was a mistake, that we accepted this and you took advantage of us. And I was like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Here's the legal definition of what's included and what's excluded. But I really didn't want it to come down to this, which is why I also wrote it into items included,
which you haven't read.
which I have in writing.
He haven't read.
Yeah, no, they read it. And you know what he said? I misread it. I thought it was in excluded items. And I'm like, why would I, as the buyer's agent, exclude items, you know? In any case, there were some hard feelings, but I mean, make it clear, man. Even me making it clear, it didn't end up the way it should have been. You want to avoid those situations if at all possible. I'm so happy this property is out of area because what's really important for me is my working reputation with other agents, right? That follows you around for the rest of your days. That agent hates you, that agent's going to hate you forever, and that feeling is going to be conveyed to their clients.
So you never got the.
When was the
I got it.
When was the resolution?
I told them, get the bed back, or you'll see us in small claims court, and we'll win. And I'll be mad because I'll have to drive all the way out there.
Was the bid returned? I assume. Well,
The bed was returned, and actually, I said that, but then I had my assistant call the nicer listing agent and tell her, look, you really want to take care of this before Kristen gets back from vacation. Nobody wants to deal with that. That's not the case, but I thought it would work, and it did. It's like, Camelia, just make it sound like you're doing her a favor. Don't want big bad wolf me coming home and dealing with this.
you'll be included in the court, even though it's between the seller and the buyer.
The buyer was one of my very best friends, so I would have been there with her, but not typically, no. All I would have had to do was give her a copy of the contract, send her, and she would have had no problem. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes an item, a seller wants an item included, so don't skip this section. All right, it's very important. And I'll give you an example. I had a townhouse with a private rooftop deck out in the valley. And the sellers told me when we were going through the listing agreement and we're talking about inclusions and exclusions, we want to leave the patio furniture. And I said, why? It's gorgeous. And they said, well, we know. We bought it. It's very expensive. We bought it on sale, no returns. And when we got it home, we realized there was no way to make it up to the staircase and through the door that goes to the private rooftop deck. We had to pay thousands of dollars to have this craned onto the roof.
Oh,
Yeah. So they're like, it's 100% staying. And I was like, okay. Because literally the only way to remove it would to be either crane it or to completely deconstruct it. What is it? Demo it. Yeah. All right. Leased or not owned items. This is, again, a very important thing. It doesn't apply in all situations. So if you go into a home and your clients have solar panels or water softeners, or you're dealing with multifamily property, which by the way is a different contract, very similar, but different contract. And they have communal washrooms, they can sometimes have equipment there that they don't actually own. It's leased from a company. Sometimes they own it, sometimes it's leased. This is important for you to know because if they don't own it, not all companies will actually allow a new owner, a buyer, to assume the lease terms, okay? Sometimes the seller will have to pay these companies off through the close of escrow in order to make their sale work. Sometimes this is a large amount of money and so that sale doesn't work for them. So before you even sign a listing agreement, if you see those things, you need to find out, do they own these items? If they do not, what are the terms? Is it transferable? And what are the terms of transfer? Not only to protect yourself from doing work on something you might not be able to sell because of it, but also in the case that you can go ahead and sell it, buyers and their agents are going to want to know what, okay, if we buy this house, then we have to assume what terms for the lease of these solar panels, right? So important that you work on this. Also, getting information from these companies is sometimes difficult, but there are also even documents that have to be ordered by the escrow company that take a long time. So it needs to be done in the beginning, like maybe even when you list it before you end up under contract, to be recorded, because these are actually recorded on title a lot of times, like liens. Yes?
Yes, you said this, listing agreement is different from multi-family. Isn't it like good for 1 to 4?
No.
So this is only single.
And condo.
So what about
Residential purchase agreement has different kinds too. There's a vacant land contract for residential purchase agreement. If you want to explore the different types of listing agreements and purchase agreements, you can go into the search bar in Zip Forms, type in the word listing. You'll see all the different listing agreements come up. Print them all out there. As long as you understand the main ones, residential, most of the same information is on these other ones. It just might have, like in multifamily, some questions about tenants and what's going to happen with occupancy and things like that. What's going to happen with security deposits. They'll cover stuff like that. But most of the contract is still the same information. Okay. Multiple listing service. That's our MLS. And this is where all listings get placed unless they are true pocket listings. Okay. A pocket listing, technically, this is one of my pet peeves, a pocket listing, you still have a signed listing agreement. Just the seller doesn't want you to market it publicly, and you have to have an additional document. Can anyone tell me the name of that additional document in order to take a pocket listing? I'm going to give you the acronym, SELM. What does that stand for? Seller? Anyone at home? SELM. What does it stand for? No one at home?
exclusion?
Yeah. Seller instruction to exclude from the multiple listing service. Okay. And you need to know the name of this document because you're going to use it on almost every listing you take, whether or not it's going to be a true pocket listing. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Okay. So pocket listing has signed listing agreement and SELM. Okay. That's a pocket listing. You don't have a signed listing agreement. You don't have a pocket listing. You have a seller lead. A lot of agents will approach you with these types of leads, trying to put an off-market deal together. You can still do it. But the big difference is there's no commission structure that's agreed to contractually by the seller. So if you're going to work with any agent who doesn't actually have a signed listing agreement, what do we need? A single party agreement. We need something that covers you, telling you what you're going to get paid if you bring your client to buy it, right?
Is
Or
that
vice
in
versa.
car?
Yeah, it's on Zip Forms on car. Yeah. Okay. So MLS is a system where we see all of our listings. This feeds out to Zillow, all of that. Does anyone know what the name of our MLS is? It has to be listed here, every single clause. What does that stand for, guys?
Combined Los Angeles West Side.
Yes, combined Los Angeles West Side. Okay, now the next question here may or may not be important, but you need to think about it every time you write a listing contract. So different areas have different MLSs. Have you ever noticed if you go into the MLS, some MLS numbers start with like an SR or PW? Ours start with what? 22, because we always start with the year, 22 dash something. And this is like the primary way you can tell if something is the same MLS as yours. So for instance, if I took a listing in Redondo Beach, my hometown, right? I do a lot of business down in South Bay still, okay? But the MLS down there is a different MLS than mine. That's okay, I can still see those listings and they can see mine because we are cooperating MLSs. But not every MLS is a cooperating MLS. And that is really what this question is about. So if I take a listing in Redondo Beach, I do have to check this box. But it doesn't affect my seller in any way because all of the local agents can see it. However, if the MLS that serves the area that my list, the primary MLS that serves the area that my potential listing is in, doesn't share with my MLS, it is not ethical for me to take that listing. Why? Because I'll put it on the MLS, but no one in that area is going to be seeing it on their MLS, right? So what do I need to do in that instance? I can take a co-listing agent in that area. I can refer it out. Likely it's going to be pretty far, and so I probably need to refer it out because I can't actually help service that listing. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And so you can check this box, and it can be not important, or it can be very important and mean that you really need to bring in a partner. All right, so we talked about the MLS, and we talked about SELM. Okay, so this whole box is about exposure to buyers in the market through the MLS. Whether or not it's going to be a pocket listing, both you and the seller signs. Okay. You don't need to check 7A. Our MLS does require that we cooperate with other brokers. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it because it doesn't affect us. Just leave 7A alone. 7C is for coming soon listings. I have never actually done a coming soon, so I don't know what it means. If you want some clarification on coming soon, this is when you list the property before it's available to be sold. That's not usually the case though. And I don't like it because I think it's unethical. If I have a listing I put coming soon, it puts me in a great position to allow unrepresented buyers to come and see it first, right? Which would be to my advantage. Bad girl. So I don't do it. I give everyone equal opportunity. Why? Because my job is to get the seller the best price at the best terms I possibly can. And the only way I can do that is if everyone has an opportunity. I would never do that, but a lot of agents do that, man. That's their MO. Coming soon. So they don't let agents like me in to have clients. They don't let my clients in, but an unrepresented buyer that's calling them from Zillow, they'll bring in. Not all agents do it that way. Sometimes they'll do it to generate a lot of interest, but I stay away from it because I think it's pretty unethical. Also, this is my personal opinion though. Everybody has different school of thought, right? I'm just sharing with you mine. I also feel like if I put it on coming soon, but then buyers can't get in, you know, if they can't get in for 2-3 weeks, what if they forgot about it? What if my seller lost that potential buyer because it hasn't been top of their mind and their agent sucks? Didn't bring it back around to them and say, oh, did you still want to see this one? Right? So I don't like it. There may be advantages to it. I would call the MLS and ask the MLS help desk about the coming soon status and what it means and what the restrictions are on it. Maybe they have, or, you know, maybe if you see a friendly agent or an agent in the office that has it coming soon, ask them what the advantage, like why. Approach them gently, right? Ask them why they might do that. I'd love to hear the strategy behind it because I can't think of one that I think is good for my client. All right, so section D, seller instructs broker. This is a section about the SELM. And as I just told you, almost every listing you ever take, you're gonna have an SELM. Why is that?
Might not be ready to be.
Exactly. I'm getting a listing agreement signed. I want it to be active within a couple of days of me taking that listing, right? Because Why do I want to work on something that isn't my exclusive listing? However, our MLS rules say that if I take a listing that's not going to be a true pocket listing, I have to put it on the MLS within 2 days of the listing period start date. I don't have,
I guess one.
one?
if we used last time was-
It might even be 2 business days. I can't remember. Let's see.
So in that case, if you have to put it on.
Yeah,
two
one-
business
more than one.
days,
No,
business
that's
day.
for something different. That's if you publicly market something that has an SELM. That's the MLS can force you to put it on the MLS within a day if you violate the rules, something different. But if you look at the SELM, it will tell you what the time frame is on there. If you look at the help section on MLS, it also tells you the time frame. I think it's 2 days or 2 business days. It used to be 2 days, I think. I think it's business days now.
It's in 7A.
7A? Mm-mm,
So would that be like,
mm-mm.
okay to use coming soon at that point, since you have that time frame to get it on the MLS? And let's say, for instance, the seller isn't prepared because they're still painting or they're still, cleaning out certain.
Yeah, they're preparing. I want my photographer too. My photographer's amazing. And he's one of my best friend's husbands. He does all like the $20 million stuff and then he comes and shoots my shit. So I have to wait for when it's convenient for him, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, come and give me like a 10% price and do it right now. It's not gonna happen. So I'm gonna wait for him because what's the most important part, at least I think, in marketing a home is probably photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't get it ready in time. No, this section in 7A is talking about when you have a true pocket listing, you're not allowed to publicly market it. You can only market it to people directly, like your own clients. So you can't post it on Instagram. Yeah, you can tell agents about it in the office. You can tell your clients about it directly. You can do direct email to another agent, but you cannot put something that any member of the public who's non-agent can just see.
And I've been seeing that with off-market online.
Yeah, you can report those people. The MLS will make them put it on the market.
Okay.
Yeah, we're supposed to have closed groups. We have a closed Facebook group. We have closed we have, and we have on KW Command, we have a pocket listing section, right? I like doing direct email marketing when I have pocket listing. In any case, yeah, it's 2 days or 2 business days. So I need this, or I want this listing valid, but I'm not going to be ready to put it on the MLS in 2 days. So what I do is I do the listing period, like active as of the day that we sign the listing. So it's valid. I go ahead and I schedule all my stuff. I check this box here, which says it's not going to be publicly marketed, and therefore an SELM will auto-populate and I'll have it signed. It's now an attachment to my listing agreement. And then closer to the time that we're ready, we've cleaned it up, we've done repair work, we've got the photos. Now I know when I can actually put it on the MLS. Oh, maybe there's a holiday, this Monday, so I don't want it to go on the market until Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week. I now know what day I want it to go on the MLS. What I do is I draft, what's the document called that modifies the terms? Not an addendum, similar.
Modification.
Yeah, modification of existing terms. And in that modification of existing terms, there are 2 things that I change. I changed that listing period, the start date, right? Because it was already active. Now I'm making it active as of the new date, the date I want to put it on the MLS. So it shows 0 days on market on MLS. And I am also, the second item on that modification of terms, I am saying that the seller instruction to exclude from the multiple listing service is hereby deleted from our contract entirely, right? Because we're not going to use it we're not doing a pocket listing. We're going on the MLS. All I'm doing is skirting the rules of having to stick it on the MLS within 2 days of it going active. I'm having my cake and eating it too, and it is legitimate. You can do this, and all agents do this. Okay. All right. So section 8 is about what information is going to be shared on the internet because of the MLS listing, and that's going to be like the address, automated estimate of value like Zestimates, and featured opt-outs. And I've had someone say to me once, oh, I don't want Zillow to be able to put a Zestimate on my home. And I said, well, okay, but it won't be on Zillow then, which is probably going to hurt your chances. But don't worry, the buyer's agent will tell their buyer that the Zestimate means nothing. Zestimates are not right. All of these automated home evaluation tools, they're all based on property record specs, which we already know aren't very often accurate, right? Square footage, bedroom, bathroom count is often inaccurate, even when it's permitted. But it doesn't take anything qualitative into account. It's an algorithm, okay? It's a computer algorithm. So can an algorithm come in and say, oh, this is completely outdated. This is all original from the 1950s. And can a computer come in and say, oh, this is completely remodeled in the interior? No, it cannot. So oftentimes crummy property it overvalues, and oftentimes great property it undervalues. Not always, but generally speaking, because it's just working with specs, just working with numbers, no qualitative stuff. So when people ask me about, am I worried about purple bricks, Redfin, these completely online, methods of buying and selling homes, I say, absolutely not. Maybe if I was in another state where I'm just a salesperson, but I'm not just a salesperson. I am the closing attorney here. I do a lot of qualitative work. My experience. Do you think an automated system is going to be able to come in and look at something and say, that doesn't look permitted to me, right? No, I can do that with my experience and my eye as a human being. We have a very complicated real estate market. And so I'm very confident in that, at least in California, we will never be replaced, which makes me very happy. In any case, so if your seller is reading this and they're like, I don't want any of this stuff, well, then they're going to lose a lot of their online exposure. I would highly advise against it. Seller representations is basically a clause that the seller says they can sell the home. They are the person who owns the home. That they're not in notice of default with their mortgage lender, that they don't have any pending litigation, again, that would affect the seller's ability to sell the home. And then section 10 is about broker and seller duties. Okay, so as a broker, what is our responsibility? We have to make a reasonable effort to sell the house, which means we have to show it, we have to market it, right? We have to get information on it. We have to do our job. And as far as for the seller, they have to provide access for inspections. They have to make the home available for showings, these kinds of things, unless it's agreed to prior that it's not going to be, that's not going to be the case. And if that's not going to be the case, you probably don't want to take that listing. Then section B says that, and you should all know this, it doesn't even matter if you're in escrow and you're closing tomorrow on your listing. If you receive an offer, even if it's not possible for a seller to accept it, you have to present it. Even if you received an offer on like a lined sheet of paper that said, I will buy the house for $1. Do you have to show that to your seller? 100% you do, okay? Unless the seller says to you and instructs you in writing, and it should be attached on an addendum to this listing contract, do not show me offers that, come in below $2 million, whatever it is, okay? That's not very common though, and I don't recommend you pushing that. Why? I've had deals that were really far apart where the buyer lowballed come together. All I do is encourage my seller, so what? Let's counter back at our listing price. Because some buyers come from the mindset of, well, it's worth a shot, right? Not thinking that, oh, they might insult the seller's not to respond, or the seller's maybe given an instruction to the listing agent not to show them offers that don't meet certain criteria. That's very uncommon. And like I said, I don't encourage that. But that is something you can do only if you have written instruction from the seller. And I would recommend making an addendum to the listing contract. All right, section 10C2B. Okay. Seller instructs broker to present buyer letters. So what are buyer letters? I call them love letters to the seller. It is a pretty common practice for, especially in a competitive market, for a buyer to write a letter to the seller, telling them how amazing their house is, flattering them for what they've done there and how they've maintained it, and telling them about what their beautiful fairy book life is going to be like. They're preserving the home and honoring it, telling them a little bit about themselves, particularly if they have, an impressive job or something like that. Why? They're trying to show their ability to purchase and their strength beyond the terms of the contract. Okay, so during the pandemic and a lot of our equal rights movements, we got that disclosure I showed you, the for housing and anti-discrimination disclosure. Around the same time, the California Association of Realtors said, we strongly discourage agents from providing love letters to the seller, particularly those with photos or that include any information that might touch on a protected class, because it opens up, you know, the seller or other agent to discrimination. Maybe I am naive, but I feel like I've been very fortunate. I've not worked with any clients like that. I strongly encourage my sellers to accept them and my buyers to write them. I do proofread them if I'm the buyer's agent. You know, I had one say that they were, you know, a home preservationist. And I was like, you don't know if this person's a developer, like pro development, like don't write anything like that. Just tell them you love the details of the house, right? We can paraphrase this. You know, I had a client who's like, she had a long-term boyfriend, but it wasn't her husband. And she said, my partner. And she's like, should I use that word? And I was like, I don't care, but what if you have, you know, like, what if it's interpreted as you're homosexual and you have an extremely conservative, you know, seller that's not comfortable with homosexuality? Do I think that will happen? No, I don't, but could it? Yeah. So why don't we rework things to where there's no information like that here? I still strongly encourage it. It is still allowed, but it is covered in our listing contract. So if your seller wants to receive them, that box needs to be checked. Otherwise, buyer's agents will typically ask you now, will you accept letters to the seller? And you'll have to tell them no, even if you want them, because you didn't take care of it in your listing contract.
You said discourage or encourage or something?
I encourage. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I proofread it. I help my clients modify it to take out stuff that I think could be inflammatory in any way or reflect poorly or be received poorly or inaccurately. Because really it's just my buyer telling them how much they love the house and how much they're going to love the house if they get to buy it. Right?
My mentor has been having me, like when I've been submitting offers to reach out to
The
seller
listing agent and ask them if they'll accept it. Yep.
Yeah. so it
Yep,
won't be like a
because
line offer.
It's no longer up to the listing agent because it is covered in our listing contract. So if this box is not checked, they can't. Okay. But again, personal opinion. Just because I like them doesn't mean if you take a listing that you should encourage your seller to check this box. You can have the same discussion we just had about why it could be good, why it could be bad. You know, some sellers are really emotional about their home and they really want to know. They want to hear from the buyers, right? Some, like my developer clients, are like, I don't give a fuck where their money came from. I just want their money, close it. They're like, letter, I'm not reading any letter. And I'm like, well, I like it because, you know, if we have a doctor and attorney here, well, they're going to be pain in the ass buyers because of their type of job. And what am I doing? I'm doing discrimination, right? No. So you have to be really careful about what you say and how you say things.
Have you ever dealt with anyone from like the mafia or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I'm just wondering.
Seriously,
Like,
most of my
wondering-
clients are doctors, attorneys, engineers, or other agents. Or developers. I'm a really technical agent. Now, that being said, my favorite ones are, you know, are usually my first time home buyers that are now sellers and their friends that they referred to me. Those are my favorite. They're so sweet. They're so fun to work with. But unfortunately, or fortunately, technical people who are very savvy to real estate like to work with me because I'm a technical agent and they are not always the easiest. They have a lot of questions and argue a lot. Especially engineers. I can say that. My dad is one. All right, investigations and reports. Did you have a question?
No, I was saying, just be ready. for that.
Just be ready for that. Yeah,
That's why we're here.
that's why you're here. Okay, investigations and reports.
I have a 145 appointment with marketing.
Go for it. I mean,
Okay.
read the rest of it. There's not much to be filled out, but there are a lot of talking points that are important for you to have with your seller when you sign the listing contract. Like it's talking about security, you know, remove your valuables. I'm gonna have people in your house, you know, that kind of thing. Just read it. You'll get it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So investigations and reports, this section is just, you can contractually obligate your seller to getting work or reports, like inspection reports. I don't contractually bind my seller to this ever. This is something that's optional and usually in their interest. And it's only usually when I walk in and, or not only usually, it is, I would only recommend, not contractually, but having them do this if I walk into a property and I see a major problem, I'm like, that's gonna come up in inspection. Let's find out what it is, how much it costs so that we can protect your purchase price. Let's see if we should fix it now, if you have the money to fix it. Maybe it's nothing and we can have that substantiated. Maybe it's a cosmetic fix, we can cosmetically fix it, and then it's not even, that question never comes up, right? But if I get these reports, what do I have to do with them? I have to give them to any buyer who makes an offer if I have reports. Okay. But again, I don't usually use the contract for that. All right, we don't need to go over agency relationship. Okay, 13, security, insurance, showings, audio and video. I'm gonna go over insurance first, it's really quick. So there's something called a vacancy clause in most homeowners insurance. So if a seller is not living in their property, and a lot of times the property is vacant when you're trying to sell it, right? Not always, but a lot of times, their homeowners insurance might not actually cover it. They might need to get a vacancy clause added to it. That's important for your sellers to know, because vacant homes are oftentimes what? Vandalized, right? Broken into, theft occurs. A lot of people, homeless will go and sleep in there. You know, I've had that happen many times.
What is it called?
Vacancy clause. Yeah. So, and this also will make you stand out amongst your competition. Most agents will never notice. They will have no idea what you're talking about. All right. Security. Ladies and gentlemen, but particularly ladies, I have had 2 very bad experiences in my career where a man came into my open house and made me very uncomfortable. One where I actually just walked out of my open house, went to the neighbor's house and called the police. I made the mistake of asking this man to leave when he first started making me feel uncomfortable and he became much more agitated. Don't make the same mistake I did. Just walk out. No seller that you want to work with will care that you left because you were worried about your safety. Bad things do happen to agents. It happens, okay? We go in alone with people we don't know, right? Especially when we work in high-end property. My bad experiences were actually mostly up in the hills, a Truesdale open house and a Bel Air open house. And you wouldn't think that, right? But they're isolated areas where the neighbors are not close. So the second one, I was really lucky. The guy I was dating at the time was becoming an agent, and I told him he could shadow me at my open house. And he happened to be upstairs on the 3rd floor turning off lights. And so I was able to call him and he came down and the man left immediately. But things do happen, but I've never had any issue since I started doing this. I'm not saying it will work every time. I ask my sellers whether or not it's true. If I can put up a sign that says the property is under video surveillance, video and audio surveillance.
What is it actually?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't care. I want everyone who walks through that door to think that it is, because I feel safer and I've never had an issue since. And I've never had a client that said, no, I don't want that. Also, showings, open houses, you need to make sure your sellers secure their valuables, and you're going to have to help them with this. Not just valuables, things like prescription medication. Also, you know, a lot of clients will have like key rings, right? They'll have extra copies of keys to their houses and cars, like sitting in a basket or on a wall. They won't think about removing these things. So you'll want to go around the house with them and point out things that should be secured. Okay. You know, my conversation with them is always, I hope that your open house is so off the hook that there's no way I can keep an eye on everyone. So we need to secure everything that we can, or that needs to be. Even stuff that's not valuable. Like I had a client who had really bright little figurines in a bathroom, and I was like, should remove those just because that's a, you know, a young child's like eye level. I don't want them broken or taken. All right, photographs.
Vacancy?
Huh?
Where's the vacancy then?
It's part of their homeowner's insurance.
Oh, you're saying
If a house is vacant, their existing homeowner's policy doesn't necessarily cover the home if they're not living in it. But most people don't know about this. So if the house was vacant during the time you've had it listed and it's vandalized or damaged in some way, the homeowner's insurance might not cover that issue. So one of the things you can talk to your seller about when you're signing the listing agreement is making sure they contact their homeowner's insurance company to make sure they are covered during the time of vacancy, and if not, so they can add that coverage. Photographs and internet advertising. I mean, I've had some sellers say, I don't want any photos. And I'm like, well, good luck selling your house. I don't want to list it. That's going to be a tall order, but I guess you could do it. And so if that's the case, you would use section 14. There's also like some sellers are like, it's fine if you take photos, controlled photos, but I don't want anyone who comes into the property to take photos. If that's the case, you'll need to remember to notify every single person and maybe post a sign if you have an open house or something like that, that taking any photos is prohibited. Key safe lockbox. The way our contract is written says it is okay for you to have a lockbox at the property. In our area, particularly in higher end, this is not usually the case, right? Your seller doesn't usually want you to have a property on lockbox. Not always the case. I just want you to know the way the contract is written. So if they say they do not want you to, you'll need to check this box. If they say that they do not want you to, you have to be very careful because like I have a team and sometimes I'll hide a lockbox that only my team agents know about. So I'll have that discussion with my seller before. Well, lockbox for me doesn't mean I'm going to let any other agent access the house without me. I'll always be there for showings and open house. But I can either make 5 copies of your key or I can make 2. I'll keep one and I'll put one in a lockbox that only my team agents that you've already met know about. So, you know, it's just a way to have that conversation. I highly recommend that all of you cross-train another agent on any listing you ever take, because you will be sick, you will sleep, you will want to have a date, you will want to go to the gym and have a life, okay? Make sure your seller is familiar with this person's familiar with the house. Do the same thing back for them. It's going to come in handy. You're going to need that help in
Have you
your
ever
career.
used the Supra where you just use your app directly? and you scan
I've
it?
never used it for one of my listings, no. I've never used a super lockbox. It's an electronic lockbox. We have a little membership through the MLS that goes through our phone that can open it, keeps track of who comes and goes. But no, I've never done that.
Like instead of a tangible physical
Mm.
key, you use the app.
I have a super key, but I don't have a super lockbox. No, I don't ever want one of my listings being shown without me or someone I've trained to show it the way I want it to be shown. I just don't want that happening. I've had people miss like I've missed when I'm showing buyer's property on Supra lockbox. I've missed an entire like room or section of a house, especially larger ones. So I just decided a long time ago, there would never be an instance in which I would perform a showing where myself or someone I appointed wasn't personally present. What the fuck did we get paid for?
Someone had me show a multifamily without, and they weren't there, so there were termites everywhere, so it was like beneficial. If we had gone for it, we would have had that advantage of already seeing it, you know. There were
Termites everywhere doesn't mean there's termites in the house. That means termites left somewhere recently.
termite
Do you see
droppings,
them?
termite
Oh, droppings. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
different. But you know, there are also termites pretty much in every house, even new construction.
Yeah,
Okay,
but like, it
Okay.
was just like, you know,
something you have to see.
like whatever they would have hidden, you know.
Yeah, well, you would have had a termite inspection.
Yeah,
had a
but
termite
maybe it would
inspection.
help our- maybe would have affected our offer if we wanted it.
No, because you don't know what the mediation for termites is gonna cost.
Typically termite inspection. is used as well.
Huh?
Typically termite inspection is used as well.
Yeah.
As part of it.
Yeah, a termite inspection is a core inspection, guys. If you're representing a buyer, you should recommend that they have a termite inspection. If it's a condo, it's optional because typically the homeowner association covers the exterior of the property. There's not usually termite infestation within the unit. That's when the homeowner would be responsible for remediation. But why not? It costs $99. Go ahead and have the termite inspection. You should always encourage your buyer to have, at a minimum, their core inspections.
A
And
quick question.
yeah.
So instead of the Supra lockbox, you said you use the Supra key? Is that
I don't use the lockbox for showings.
Oh, no. Okay.
You can, but I don't. If I had a bunch of vacant property and I was like a mega agent that had 40 listings, I would be forced to, I'm sure, use a Supra. Let's see, sign, oh, if the client doesn't want you to have a sign, you check this box. That's another discussion you have with your client. Not all condo associations will allow signs. Some cities regulate the size of signs, so don't just think you can go ahead and put a sign on any listing you have. You have to make sure that the city allows it, and if it's a condo, that the HOA allows it. Additional terms. So if the property vesting, remember that's a seller name, right? That's how title is held. If the seller is in the name of a trust, you need to check this box and a form's going to auto-populate. It's just an advisory. If the seller says to sell my home, it's contingent that I find an upleg, my new home. That's a fancy real estate term for my new home, my next home, my upleg. You check this box,
It's called outlet.
upleg, but only really like older school or super technical agents would even know what that term is, or commercial. You want to impress a commercial, well, you're not going to impress them because then they're going to, a commercial agent, because you're going to start talking to them and they're going to realize that's the only term you know. But yeah, upleg is the fancy term for my next property. So just like a buyer can make a contingent offer, I can only buy your home if I sell mine. A seller can do the same thing. I can only close on the sale of my home to you if I find another one that I close on.
Kristen,
Yeah.
the trust advisory is if the property is in the name of a trust.
Mhm. Mhm. Let's see. So if the property vesting is also not just a trust, including trust, but also LLC, corporation, anything like that, you're going to check this box. There's another disclosure that comes up, and what it goes over is it goes over like if my property, if I'm the seller and I have vesting in the Christen Tull family trust, that document's going to say, who am I in relation to that trust? How do I have signing authority? Okay, pretty simple stuff. And that's basically it, guys. That's listing agreement. Any questions?
Thank you.
You're
Will it be
welcome.
on tonight on the YouTube?
It should be on YouTube tonight. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're very welcome. Sure.
where can the title to the house be found?
Ask a title rep to give you vesting, or get title software from them where you can look it up yourself.
Title software?
Ask a title rep, they'll set you up with it. They'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Usually where, you need to have access to the title for a lot of things. So where do you?
And your
look?
title rep will set you up with free software where you can get this access to for yourself at any time from your own computer.
Oh, so for each transaction or for each of your listings, you have to ask the title rep?
Yeah, no, well, you need to refer to title information, which you can get from your title rep or from title software that your title rep will set you up with, so you can look it up yourself anytime you want to.
Thank you. And also, you mentioned pocket listings. Where can I find them?
You'd have to network with other agents and look for closed groups that have them.
Oh, that's the only way. So I cannot look in MLS or.
Pocket listing means it's not on the MLS and cannot be publicly marketed. Only direct person-to-person marketing.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Any more questions? All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.